Hey friend, welcome to the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Emily Cleghorn. This podcast is for mamas navigating childhood trauma while also walking through mamahood. Together, we will empower each other to connect with who we were created to be versus who we were told to be in our trauma. I'm so excited that you've decided to take some time out of your day to join me and tune in. I hope you find this podcast uplifting and empowering. Let's get to it. Hello, friends. Welcome to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I'm so excited that you have taken some time out of your day to tune in and listen to our conversation today. I am excited to be joined by Kaila. Welcome.
It's Kaila.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It happens all the time. I didn't even think about it until you were starting to say my name. And I was like, oh, shit.
I have a niece who spells her name exactly like yours, and it's said Kaila. So,
oh, wow.
That's where the pronunciation came from. But welcome, Kaila.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here and correct any pronunciations that you might need corrected.
Yeah, let's dive right in. I'm so excited for our conversation today. So let's get started by giving our listeners a little bit of a background as to who you are and how you came to be working in this space.
Absolutely. I'm actually very excited about this too, because I realized it's been a while since I've talked about my trauma with anyone other than my therapist and my husband. Like it's just been a couple months. So I'm like, great, this is great. I'm ready to dive in. So my name is Kaila. I have a parenting podcast because I have a 3-year-old. My son was born in May 2020. Yes, that month of that year. Yes. Everybody always goes like, oh, like when they're like, how old is he? And I'm like, oh, he's 3. And they're just not like thinking about it. And then inevitably either someone asks like, what year was he born? Or I say like, oh yeah, it's May 2020. And then the reaction's always, oh, and I'm like, yeah,
I have a February 2020 baby. So
yes, just ripe for trauma.
Yeah.
So I created Parentel in November of 2020 after I was coming out of my postpartum anxiety haze. And I had spent majority of my pregnancy feeling just like really jilted, like just very caught off guard, like people who had been pregnant before me just like really hadn't been honest with me. And I just like wasn't prepared for that. So, and that theme definitely continued into early motherhood, and especially early postpartum for me. So by November, I was like, you know what? I'm ready to talk. Like, can we talk about this? Because I feel like no one in my life is talking about this. I would love to have an honest conversation about what it's actually like to be pregnant and give birth and raise a child while you also had a traumatic childhood yourself. So
yes.
I've been doing, yes. So I've been doing it since November 2020. I have taken breaks every now and then here or there. And more recently, I actually became a childbirth educator in, oh my gosh, it's been over a year. It's been like a year and a half. I became a childbirth educator. And I teach virtual and in-person childbirth classes here in Northern Virginia in the US. And that's another healing thing for me for sure, because as I'm sure you know, well, if you gave birth in February, maybe you did have the opportunity to attend birth classes, but all of mine were canceled. And it was just like the pure panic of the pandemic. And I just never got to experience what it was like to like exist in a room full of other pregnant people who are like due right before you, right after you at the same time. And so I would really like to provide that inclusive, like all-encompassing, empowering space for people. So that has also, so like the podcast came first, and then Not Your Mama's Birth Services, like, is running because parental walked. So that's pretty much me. Before all of this, I was a kindergarten teacher. Definitely seems
Oh
like in
man.
another life. Yeah, seems like it's in another life. My last year teaching was the year that I had my son. So yeah, that was 3.5 years ago. So that's pretty
Mm,
much me. That's me as an adult. That's adult me. That's adult Kaila. And I know we're also here to talk about what it's like to be a mom having experienced trauma as a child. And that is for sure such a huge, like, shadow, or at least at first, like a huge shadow in your life that also people don't mention that, like, hey,
mm,
some things might come up. Like
mm-hmm,
once you become a mom and you're looking at your child that you love more than anything in the world, and all of a sudden you're like really mad at your parents, like that might happen to you,
mm-hmm,
which happened to me.
mm-hmm. Oh man, I feel like there are so many connection points. I was also a teacher before the pandemic. I left the classroom in December of 2019 because
Wow.
I had varicose veins with my son.
Mm.
And varicose veins in your lady region, friends, hurts like the Billy Dickens. I had to lay down with my feet up in the air to get the
Wow.
blood to go away.
Slow down. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, lightning crotch on a whole other level.
Yeah.
Um, apologies if that's TMI for anybody. Um,
I
but
mean,
it's a
well,
thing. It's a
why are you
thing.
listening to this then? Like, come
Yeah.
on. You know where you are. You know what you're listening to.
Um, so I taught second grade and fifth grade. I was a
Oh,
fifth
wow.
grade teacher before I had my daughter. And
Okay.
then when I went back after having my daughter, before having my son, I was a second grade teacher. And it feels like it's a whole other life.
Yes, for sure.
And it hasn't been that long.
I know. I started to be like, and that was 5 years ago. And I was like, wait, no, that was literally 3 years ago. Like I was
Yeah.
prepared to be like, that was a decade ago because it feels like it. But no, it's just wild. Time is, I think that's also another thing. Like the pandemic made us all realize is like time truly is just like a social construct because it's just
Hmm.
such a blur, but also like trauma brain. That's why
Hmm.
we have no reference of time, because our brain's like, that was a really hard time. Let's go ahead and forget that. I'm going to protect you. And I'm like, thank you, but also no, thank you, because now I'm like, I sound like a crazy person.
Yeah. There are so many things that I experienced that I was like, whoa, wait, what? Nobody told me about this. Nobody
Yes.
told me that all of the repressed emotions that I had buried as a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year old were going to come like a flipping freight train down the track and side rail me postpartum.
Yes. Absolutely.
And that's something you need to be aware of.
100%. Because also, the way my anxiety works is I would like to know about
Mm-hmm.
things beforehand so that they're just a little less jarring, a little less shocking, and I just can handle them
Mm-hmm.
better. Yeah, yep, that's something that no one ever mentioned that to me. And which is, and I'm not saying that like, we're the rare people. Like, no, like almost
It,
every single person has trauma, and almost like so many people have childhood trauma. So it's
mm-hmm.
not like it was this rare thing. It's definitely something that happens to vast majority of people after they give birth or after they become a parent. But yeah, but nobody is talking about it. And yet I feel like when I finally start finding people who were willing and open to talk about this with me, one, I obviously felt less alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nice to have some validation, and it normalized it for me. But at the same time, I was like, if so many people are experiencing this,
Why are
why
we not
aren't
talking
we
about it?
why are we not talking about it? Because also, like, for all the future pregnant people out there, for all the future parents out there, like,
Mm-hmm.
that should be something Like, you're supposed to take a prenatal, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. Let's add that to the list. Like,
Mhm.
hey, if you don't have a therapist, if you don't have some sort of mental health counseling, if you don't have some sort of like mental health,
Community.
yes, coping strategies, like you need to get some right now because some
Yeah.
stuff can't predict what stuff will come up, which is part of the hard part, but some
Mhm.
stuff is going to come up once
Mhm.
you are staring at that precious baby angel and you realize that you are standing in the shoes that your parents were once standing in,
Mhm.
and suddenly it just makes you question all of the decisions that they
Mhm.
made for you when you were an innocent child, and it can be really really hard, and it can obviously impact your present relationship with your parents. I mean, I already personally didn't have a really great relationship with my mom pre-pregnancy. We struggled a lot, and now she has actually since passed away, so it is a very hard tough point for me. But it didn't really make my relationship with her easier, like having all of these
No.
repressed memories come up. And like kind of same thing with my dad. I feel like I just saw him, like you see your parents differently after
Yeah.
you have a child.
Yeah. It does change your perspective. And there's another element of shock if you have a baby girl. For me, my
Mm,
first child was a baby girl, and when I looked at her, she looked like baby Emily. I looked at her, I saw me. And it took me months to realize that I am not my mother, she is not me, and I can make different choices.
yeah. And like talk about another level of like a mind warp that you have to work through
Mm,
because the physical appearance is the same. So I have a son. And I will say he does have my face. It is that's another lighter thing to like see another human and you're like,
whoa, you
what?
look like
Like,
me.
yeah, like it's so weird and it's really cool, but it definitely has its downsides where it can just like immediately just put you back into your child frame of mind.
Mhm,
And yeah, like there are even now, like now that he's older and just like so much more expressive, sometimes I really do look over at his face and I'm just like, wow, like there's baby Kaila. Like, wow. And
mhm,
it just, you have a whole new respect, but in sometimes almost like a new fear of like
mhm,
how innocent they are because you were the exact same. You were that
mhm,
innocent as a
mhm.
child. And my brain immediately goes to like, how could I ever do anything
How
to
could I
like
do
hurt?
what
Mhm.
was done to me?
Yes, how could I ever even contemplate like leaving him in the circumstances that I was left in? And
Mhm,
for me, I was left with an unsafe caregiver, and
mhm,
it was and now that is definitely like that's like a trigger point with me. I had for the longest time, I had a really hard time leaving Robin with that's my son's name, leaving Robin with anyone other than my husband. And if we would
mhm,
go somewhere together, I would like, like my anxiety would go through the roof. And I would
mhm.
just, I mean, it took, I mean, also because of the pandemic, like we didn't really have anybody coming over to watch him anyway. And where we lived at the
Yeah.
time wasn't close to family. So that probably helped but hurt at the same time that I necessarily didn't have the opportunities to
Mhm,
like work myself up to it and get used to it. But it wasn't until he was probably closer to 2 that I
mhm,
felt like I could leave the house and like not check the camera right away
mhm,
and just like trust that he is going to be okay. And like we
mhm,
have vetted whoever, like, whether they're a family member or not, like we have vetted who's going to be there. And also learning to let go of some of the control because my
mhm,
anxiety makes me want to have control over everything, which then
mhm,
just makes my anxiety feel worse. So it's like, it's such a spiral. But yeah, it's really, really hard. And I think it's something that like everybody should really explore. Even if you don't end up having children, you have to explore like these repressed parts of yourself, these repressed memories, and kind of
Yeah.
at least work. Maybe you're not comforting like your real child if you don't have a child, but like maybe you're working to comfort your inner child, because that is really hard work too. But that's
Mhm.
really important work that you have to do
Yeah.
to heal yourself, which then we all know by this point, if you're working on yourself, if you're trying hard to be there for yourself and reparent and be there for your inner child, it's only going to benefit your
Mhm.
children.
Yeah. Yeah. Your healing work is for you, but it also overflows and benefits your little ones.
Yes. Yes.
So, what was your journey like through postpartum?
So it was very rough for me. Um, and I will say, when I was pregnant, one of my biggest fears was that I would have postpartum depression.
Mhm.
I'm already prone to anxiety and depression. I've already struggled with that in the past. And so I knew then, like it's a fact. Statistically, I do have an increased risk of suffering from that. So I remember, and this is like not even talking about the pandemic, but just I remember kind of telling my husband, like, I am concerned about this. I think I told a provider as well, just like, I'm aware of it. It's giving me anxiety that like postpartum can be really hard for me. Um, I kind of want it like written down in my chart, and like I want my spouse to know, because if I'm deep in it, I know I'm not necessarily going to be able to see it. Um, but postpartum anxiety was something that I didn't even know about
Mhm.
until after I gave birth. And I'm basically like reading through like a checklist of symptoms, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. So I like definitely have this. This makes so much sense. And then it wasn't until maybe like a year later that I found out about perinatal anxiety.
Oh
I was
my
like,
god.
oh, that's why I had to go on Zoloft while I was pregnant. Like, hello, everything's adding up. But
Mhm.
so I did struggle with postpartum anxiety. I would say for at least the first like 4 to 5 months of my postpartum period. This was May 2020 on to the fall of 2020. So it was also just like a really weird vibe in the world. It was a
Mhm.
really weird vibe in the US. So that didn't help things. I ended up hemorrhaging while I was giving birth. I suffered 3 lacerations in my cervix. So if you know, your cervix is like a
Mhm.
clock, where like 12 is on the top. Mine were on, and I just read the information, but it's like, again, trauma brain. My brain's like, forget that. If I'm remembering correctly, mine were on 3 o'clock, no, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 7 o'clock. And the ones at 6 and 7 were so deep in my cervix that they couldn't see. So I'm like paraphrasing, but it took a while for them to figure out where exactly the bleeding was coming from, what was happening. But that resulted in me bleeding for 2 hours after giving birth. So I lost a lot of blood. I had to go into semi emergency, like exploratory surgery. So I was separated from my son when he was only 2 hours old. Um, and the blood loss, now knowing what I know now, especially having become a childbirth educator and starting to dive
Mhm.
into the realm of actual birth work, knowing what I know now, the blood loss is also what really made early postpartum difficult for me. I mean,
Mhm.
I lost so much blood, they were almost going to take me to the PACU. Like I was very close to going there, and then I would have been separated from my son. So it was just a very rough experience. There are
Mhm.
some things that like I still don't even fully remember, and my husband will have to be like, "Oh no, well like this happened and that happened." Um but it was rough. I just wasn't prepared. I was not prepared
Mhm.
for postpartum. Long story short, I was not prepared for postpartum, and I know I'm not alone
No, you're not.
because
I was not prepared for postpartum with my first child either.
yeah.
I didn't have a sweet clue what was coming for me.
Right. And I just feel like that is why, I mean, in my birth class, I focus like so much on postpartum and like what you should prepare
Mhm.
yourself mentally for, how you can set yourself up for an
Mhm.
easier, quote, postpartum and just a smoother transition, and also like just realistic expectations of,
Yeah.
and also like biological norms of like your body and your baby's body. Because I think that's also where a lot of it comes from, is unfortunately, we don't understand a lot of biological norms anymore. And our expectation for our own body is that like, oh, we're gonna be fine. Or
Yeah.
like, we'll be fine. Everything will be fine. It won't be that bad. It won't be as bad as everybody's saying, or like, we'll recover like really quickly. For some people, that's 100% the case. But for
Hmm.
majority of people, that's not how it works. And then especially if you have birth complications or if you have a surgical birth of any kind,
Hmm.
you are looking at a solid recovery time, a solid period of
Mm.
recovery. And so I do try and let people know that like planning for your birth doesn't end like baby's born, done.
Yeah.
Like no, like if anything, like you need to spend as much time planning for your postpartum as you do planning for your labor and your
Hmm.
delivery. And a
Hmm.
lot of, it's kind of like, it kind of makes me sad because like I think for some people it is one of those things where like they're not going to understand it until they experience it.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And that's okay. But okay. I'll just finish the sentence because I was saying, oh, and some people don't understand all of the reasons why I harp on postpartum preparation until they're experiencing it. And for them, it's like,
Hmm.
oh, now I get it. And that is okay. But I try to, like, without scaring people, obviously, I try to just let them know, like, look, when you bring home that roommate who pays no rent, your life from the get-go is going to look a whole lot different. And we
Hmm.
all think that we're going to be able to do like so many things, and
Hmm.
that like, yeah, like, oh yeah, we all say like, oh yeah, it'll be different. But there's a, you either like, you say it's going to be different or you fully understand that like your whole
Yeah.
life has changed down to just like the most minute details, like bathing, hygiene, like especially in those
Going
like
to
those
the
first
bathroom
four.
by yourself.
Yes, like the first like 4 weeks, especially where you're just like, it's going to take you longer to get to the bathroom, like even just contemplating those things. And I think that's like postpartum education is one of those things that particularly is not known, is
No.
not talked enough about. And I will like, and I know that's not the purpose of this episode, but I will sit here and talk to anybody all day about why you need to be prepared, because also like the strong ties to your mental health.
Hmm.
And I think that's like kind of where I am coming from when I talk about it, is like your mental health is going to be in a completely different state. One,
Hmm.
because of the hormone drop off, and which you have no control over. So let's focus on the things that we do have control over,
Hmm.
because you ultimately, when it comes to birth, that is a true lesson in, you are, if your baby wants to come out a certain way, they're going to come out a certain way. Like
Hmm.
you have to let go. But we can get the house clean before we give it, like we can have the freezer meals, like all of those things you can have control over. You can set up your little basket in the bathroom with your witch hazel wipes, like all of those things we can have control over. So like let's focus on that, because you won't be regretting it when you're hobbling to the bathroom in the middle of the night. You'll be glad that you set up your little caddy 5 weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, yes, our bodies, as the female body is designed to give birth. That is one of our many purposes, is to multiply the population. But it is traumatic.
Yes.
It's like going for surgery. And it is going for surgery if you have a C-section,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a small surgery. It's
Major abdominal
major
surgery.
surgery.
I literally have it right next to me because I have like my birth stuff next to me. I have, it's felt, and it
Hmm.
shows the seven layers, the 7 layers to get to your baby. It is major,
Major
major.
surgery. For
Yeah.
me, I with my daughter, I was rushed off immediately for emergency surgery because I experienced a detached placenta
Oh, man.
and I also bled a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so not only was I dealing with the postpartum, I just pushed a baby out. I was also dealing with the side effects of anesthesia on my body and all of those post-op checklist things.
Yeah.
Like I had I my labor for my daughter was 23 and a half hours. I did not sleep for a full day. Like I
Yeah.
I nested the day I went into labor at supper time and did not have my daughter until 4:45 the next day.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean,
I
it's a
was
marathon.
I was exhausted. And then I
Yeah.
went to emergency surgery. Then I had a nurse coming into my room every 2 hours and trying to make me go to the bathroom. I'm like, "Please leave me alone.
Have you
I'm tired.
seen
I
have you
need
it's
to
my
sleep."
favorite. The like it's the Instagram reels where it's this one dude. I don't know if maybe he is like a labor and delivery nurse in real life, but he literally makes these reels that are just the most accurate. He does one when you're getting a sonogram, but he does one when it's like coming in, like, I'm just gonna turn these lights on real quick, and like flicks the lights on and just like, oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Hey mama. Like just like, so sorry to wake you up. Like I because I'm laughing because it literally is like, and I think that's another thing, such a small thing that like that
Li
why a lot of people, I would say, especially their second baby, I've heard so many people be like, you could not send me home fast enough. I just
Mhm,
wanted, if they had a
mhm.
hospital birth, like they were like, I just wanted to get out of there. I wanted them to stop bugging me. I wanted them to like stop turning the lights on. And it's just, yeah, it is such a, no matter what, and I think this is a hard truth for some people to hear, but no matter what, there is going to be some sort, could be so tiny, could be 15 minutes, but there's going to be some part of your labor and delivery that you end up reflecting on as traumatic
Mhm.
because it's inevitable. I mean, even, and someone pointed this out to me a couple of years ago, and it was like such a aha moment that being born is also traumatic. Like
Trauma.
you and baby, yes, like you and baby have both experienced trauma, which
Mhm,
is one of the reasons also why, kangaroo care is essential. We are doing skin on skin because like, yes, we talk about the benefits for the baby, but also this directly benefits the
mhm,
mother or the birthing
mhm,
person. This directly benefits each other because you guys just went through something together. And like, yeah,
mhm.
your spouse was in the room, but they weren't
They didn't feel
physically.
it.
Yeah. And it is this bond that you guys do share from the very beginning, which is super extraordinary and beautiful. And it's also, it both exists. We're in the land of and it also like kind of sucked in some ways, or
Mm,
like certain parts just like really leave you a completely different person. And like the physical recovery, it was probably, my son was probably closer to maybe like 8 weeks. And I remember kind of standing there changing his diaper. And I don't remember if my husband was there or maybe I was just like saying it to myself because I was starting to feel just like physically like, oh, like just a little bit better, just like a little more normal.
mhm,
And I remember just being like, wow, I feel like if I didn't have to care for a newborn and care for my war torn physical self, if like I was physically okay and physically like
mhm.
tip top shape and caring for a newborn, I might be okay. Like this might not seem as hard, but it really is the fact that like you're caring for this helpless lump and at the same time your body has just been pushed to the edge and for many people past it, over the
Mhm,
edge. And
mhm.
you have to come back from that. And that is
Yeah.
something that I think a lot of people who haven't experienced it yet truly don't understand how much harder it is to care for a newborn when you yourself need to be cared for mentally and
Mhm.
physically. And that's another aspect of postpartum that totally goes ignored and just
Mhm.
not enough attention is paid to. We have to
Mhm.
mother the mother.
Mhm.
Like, yes, a baby was born that day. A brand new parent was also born. And they've
Mhm.
also never done, if it's their first child, they've also never done this before. And I tend to remind people like, look, the mom or the birthing person, they have the baby. I'm not worried about the baby.
Mm.
I'm paying attention to the adult.
Mhm.
I want to know, how can I help you? I don't
Mhm.
need to hold your baby. I just went over yesterday. One of my clients, she gave birth in July, and I went over for a postpartum visit just yesterday. And um, I told her, I was like, I don't need to, like, it's fine. Do not feel like you need to give me your baby. I don't need to hold your baby. I'm here for you. I
Mhm.
know you have the
Yeah.
baby, you've got it, you're doing a great job. I'm here for you. And that's
Mhm.
another aspect of postpartum care that I think people just don't fully grasp. Like, we're
Yeah,
missing the mark a lot.
we are. And then add in the trauma freight train. And that just takes things to a whole other level because you're not just caring for your body that was put through the ringer and this beautiful little baby that doesn't know night from day is learning how to eat and, and do life outside of the womb. You're also dealing with your wounded inner child,
Yeah. Intrusive thoughts.
intrusive thoughts, guilt,
Yeah.
shame, fear.
Yes. All
Like
of those were, and also
for
because the hormone drop,
yeah.
it doesn't, everything is like to the extreme. And it's very hard for your normal quote and like regulated self to differentiate. I remember it's such a weird, I feel like even like while I was pregnant, obviously your hormones are all, they're all just working differently. You have increased rates of hormones. And I remember being like, I would react to something. And obviously that would just be like my knee jerk reaction. But then even internally in my brain, I'm like, whoa, that was
Chills
like a
out.
real, like, yes. I was like, that's like a really big reaction, girl. Like, are you okay? And it's like, no, I'm not okay. Like, it's such a strange dichotomy that you have happening in your own body. And that also feels really foreign. And then you feel extra vulnerable and then you
Mhm.
just don't feel like yourself mentally. And it just makes everything harder. And
Mhm.
no wonder, like, no wonder I purpose, or honestly, I tell my clients the rule of fives when it comes to postpartum: 5 days in the bed, 5 days on the bed, 5 days near the bed. And it's so funny because I've had multiple people be like, I don't get it. What do you mean? And I'm like, no, literally, like, there's nothing to get. I'm telling you, you're spending the first 5 days in your bed. You are in your bed with your baby. You don't need to be anywhere else. And also, people don't really want to visit someone like in their primary or master bedroom. So
No.
if you do have visitors, they'll scoot real quick, as they should. 5 days on the bed. Maybe you're not underneath the covers. You're hanging out on the bed. You're taking the occasional trip out to the kitchen. 5 days near the bed. You've moved to the couch, but you're
Mm.
still at home. Because not, and it's really, for me, the rule of fives is not even necessarily for physical recovery, although obviously that's a benefit and that's working in your favor. For me, a lot of it is mental recovery and just like holding that space sacred and just like limiting visitors. You are
Mhm.
staying in your most comfortable space, which for most people is their home. And then for a lot of people, it is their bed or their bedroom, because that is going to have a profound impact on how your mental health is doing in the
Mhm.
immediate postpartum. And that should be your priority. I don't like, you want to come over? I'll see you in a month. You can drop the food off at my door, text me and let me know that it's there. Great. Thank you so much. You would like to help me? like have things delivered in the first couple days, or literally when I'm sleeping, come over and do my laundry or empty my dishwasher. That is helpful for me. But I think a lot of people have great intentions, very good intentions. Friends and family have very good intentions, but we just aren't well educated about what is really going on during the postpartum time. Even if you
Mhm.
have a kid, maybe you had a child, if it's your mom or your mother-in-law, maybe you had a child 20 plus years ago and you just
Yeah.
forget. Our brains forget things, again, like to protect us. So yeah, it is mentally, physically, like it is a journey. It's a journey. And it's
Yeah.
always towards the end of an episode where I'm like, ooh, this is probably like sounding really scary to someone who has never like given birth. And this is the time when I'm always like, I am not like, not, we're not saying this to scare anyone. We're saying this so that you feel more prepared. We're saying
Yeah.
this
So
because
you're
it's,
not
it's just,
sidelined.
yes. So
You're
that
not
you don't feel
T-boned.
as shocked as we, yeah. So you don't feel as shocked and caught off guard as we did. Like basically just trying to pay it forward. And it might seem very scary and very like just shocking right now, but like let's get that shock over with now. And that way when you're experiencing
Yeah.
it, instead of being like I had no idea, it's more of a that's right, they did mention this, didn't they?
They
Okay,
did
I'm
mention
remembering
this,
that.
and
Yeah.
I have done my homework. I've prepared. I know how to support my body. I know how to support myself. I've got a community of moms who have walked this road and know how to support me. Like, I'm good.
Yeah. And that's what I want for my clients. Like that's what I want for people who listen to the podcast, because the more we spread that around, the more we sprinkle that around, it's contagious. And
Mhm.
hopefully, the hope is that in the grand scheme, all of these things, all of these facets of pregnancy and postpartum become more normalized in conversations. So
Mhm.
people don't feel as alone. So people feel okay talking about it. And it's also more widely just accepted as universal facts in our
Mhm.
society, because then that has great ramifications on like maternity and paternity leave and being a parent in the workplace, like all of it's a
Mhm.
domino effect. So if we can get
Yeah.
people to understand first like what actually happens during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, then we move on to like what it's like to be a parent in society, what it's like to have all the different dynamics of parenting and familyhood and raising children. And we're just really looking for understanding, because with
Yeah.
understanding comes empathy. And I
Mhm.
just feel like that is something that we have lost a lot of empathy. And it is something like
Mhm.
it's so easy to lose it because we're very egocentric human beings are egocentric people. And so of course we're naturally thinking of ourselves first. But the way to also, I feel like the way to like raise good children, the way to like have good interactions with other people is to really just keep empathy at the forefront of your
Yeah.
mind. That's something I try to do a lot. And I feel like it's made me just a more understanding person and a more forgiving person, a more patient person. And it also helps me not to take other people's shit personally,
Yeah.
because I know that has like someone's reacting towards me a certain way, or I'm having a difficult interaction with someone. I know that ultimately this has very little to do with me. And
Yeah.
then I'm not a total dick to them and I can just be nicer because I'm like, all right, this isn't about me. So like I'm not gonna take this personally. Like we can move through this interaction and like
Mhm.
I will be okay at the end of the day. And I hope you are too. But also like that has nothing to do with me. Best of luck to you.
Yeah. So what tips do you have for mamas or mamas to be who are navigating postpartum?
So I feel like my answer has changed over the last year and a half, more and more as I come to the realization, and it's also as people are talking about it, that like, I feel like a lot of people say, like, get your village, get your village.
Mhm.
But the reality is, for most people, The village is no longer free.
Nope.
The village is paid. You have to pay for the village. And that right there is a barrier for
For
most, if not all of
a lot of
us
people.
in some way. Yeah. So I feel like a year ago, I would have been like, like make sure essentially that would have been my like, get your village, get your village. And now that's not something, I mean, obviously that still applies, but I think it's also just important to start to think about who you want around you
Mm-hmm.
in that vulnerable time.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, it's not necessarily going to be the people that, or the people who show up might not necessarily be the people who they're thinking are going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say like number one, think about like who can you be your most vulnerable with?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you trust the most in the world? And go to them for help. But before baby comes out, all
Yeah.
of this you should start to formulate some sort of plan of action, just general like idea of what you would like before baby is born.
Mm-hmm.
Like logistics, food. Get like get someone to make you freezer meals, make them yourself. There's many places out there that will, or there's many apps, excuse me, there's many apps out there where you can actually like send like almost like a postpartum wish list to people and they can show up for you. It's called, the one I use or the one I recommend to people is called Mothership Rising. That
Mm-hmm.
is an app where like you basically, if you would like someone to come and do laundry, like you put your list and people can volunteer for that. I would say like the biggest thing is think about what you would do for someone else and then get those things done for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, like logistic wise, like think about having your house cleaned or, like either maybe someone put that on your registry. People can donate to have your house cleaned before you give birth, getting meals ready. Also, though, getting like postpartum things for you. Everybody's like, oh, do you have diapers? Do you have wipes? Do you have all this?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have disposable underwear for yourself? Do you have pads? Do you have mesh underwear? Do you have witch hazel wipes? Do you have just things that you're going to need for your own body? That's what I tend to
Mm-hmm.
buy my friends who are having kids now. I like hardly ever buy anything for the actual baby. And I'm like, can I buy you postpartum things instead? Like, I think your registry is great, but like, I'm seeing some things that are missing. Can I buy you some things?
Yeah.
Um,
We
and
forget
people
to
are
take care of
rarely,
ourselves.
yes, like you're going to need things, not just baby. And frankly, you need more things than the baby needs. Baby literally needs a safe place to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
nutrition, diapers. And
Yep.
if they're born in the winter, some clothes, but like summer babe, like skin to skin. Again, like we know we're doing skin on skin. Like you don't really need that many things. You certainly don't need toys. Think about more instead, like, yeah, like what do you need for yourself? And it can be hard if it's your first baby. You might not know what you need. But then I would honestly like see if you can have candid conversations. If you know people who have already had children, and I guarantee you, like it might be a little awkward at first, but I guarantee you, if you can kind of just like break the ice, the parent will be like, oh my God, yeah. Or be like, oh, I loved these disposable underwear. Like, can I buy them for you? Or can I send you the link? And I think that right there is like how you start to build your support network. I won't really use the term village, but your support network,
Yeah.
because it's going to require, like we're not supposed to do this by ourselves.
No.
Like we are pack animals. We're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to do this with other people. And that also includes like mental health preparation. I
Mm-hmm.
have always said, they give you so many papers when you walk out of the hospital if you give birth at a hospital. And I've always said that, like, I don't need any of those papers that you're giving me. What they should give you is a piece of paper with your talk therapy appointment scheduled. Like, and here's that's going to be scheduled for you in about a week. And then your physical therapy appointment.
Mm-hmm.
That is the type, like, that's what we should be rolling out of the hospital with. Like, because I'm ready to start, like, I need someone to look at my physical self and I need someone to look at my mental self as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's such a, I know my answer is all over the place, but that's because it's so hard to
Mm-hmm.
pick like just a few things because there's so many different ways to prepare yourself. But ultimately, some like even if you only pick like 2 of the 7 things that I just said, like some sort of prep, you will not regret it. You will be thanking yourself later. I would say for me personally, like having like mental health support ready,
Yeah.
whether that be your spouse or a professional, or even just like I said, like putting it out into the air that like, hey, I'm worried about this. Like, can you just help me like keep an eye out, basically? Yeah, it is. Yeah. So that was, I wanted to like answer that question better, but,
It
but
was
it was
great.
hard.
It was great.
There's just so
Great.
much. Like there's so much, there's so many
There's
things.
so much. Like, and no word of a lie, when I got home from the hospital after both of both of my babies were born, I had the big packet of paper from the hospital. I set it down somewhere. To this day, I have no idea where it is.
Oh, it's gone. It's
It's
gone. You have
gone.
no
I have
idea.
no idea where it is. Well, I know it's gone because I moved across the country in the from since my son was born. And like my memory was sitting down, opening my computer as sleep deprived as I was, and filling in my maternity leave stuff on the government website, trying to remember my social insurance number because you need that for maternity leave. Like, why can't things like that be done before my brain
Yes.
is toast?
And yeah, that is definitely, someone mentioned something similar to that to me the other day, and they made me remember that when I was, I mean, it had to have been before Robin came out of my body, but we were definitely in the hospital. I think maybe like the epidural had already been put in. So I was able to like literally text my team leader of my kindergarten team to be like, hey, yeah, like
I'm
I'm
not
having the
coming.
baby now. Yeah. Like just so you know, like please don't text me. Like, and I said, I was like, feel free, like, please like let the principal know, like whoever, I don't care, but like do not contact me. And I do remember
Mm.
thinking, like, how absurd is it that I'm sitting here doing this
Oh man.
in labor? Like,
I
that's a
was
whole nother, like,
I was getting ready to push. I looked at a nurse. I First I looked at the clock. I was like, "Oh, PD has started. I wish I was there."
rather be there than doing
Because
this.
it was the first day. It was the first day of like the beginning of the school year PD. And I was like, man, I'd so rather be there than here.
That's amazing. Oh my God. That's so funny. Wait, so your daughter was born in what, like
In
August or
September.
September? Okay, yeah. That's really funny. But that also is like from a teacher perspective, that is that's one of the worst times to like have a child, because your brain, exactly, your brain is just like beginning of school year mode, and it is just so hard to not be
Mm,
there for those
mm.
things. So also putting it into context of like what time of year it was, I'm sure non-teachers are like, that's fucking crazy. Like, no, like that's how our brains work. It's based on the
Mm.
school calendar.
Oh, look, it's 10:15. It's recess time. I'm hungry.
Yes, yes, like you know exactly. Yeah, even when you're not there, you're looking at the schedule. You're like, yeah, they're doing this right about now. Like, yeah, that's so funny. Oh my gosh, yeah, I get that.
I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. How can our listeners connect with you further if they would like to work with you or speak with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram. That is my only social media platform. I cannot maintain multiple social media accounts. It's just really not for me. You can find the podcast on Instagram at Parent Tell. That's 2 words squished into one, Parent Tell. And then you can find my birth services Instagram account at Not Your Mama's Birth. If you would like to send me an email, please do. I do have people send me emails every now and then. It's just like so nice to hear from people,
Mm.
and also like hear suggestions about topics. That's parenttellpod@gmail.com. And then if you would like to talk more about birth services or birth working stuff, childbirth education, it's notyourmamasbirth@gmail.com.
Awesome. So I will include links to Kayla's Instagram accounts in the blog episode that goes with this episode. They'll be clickable, so you can click and follow in 2 simple steps so you don't get distracted in between. Thank you, Kaila, so much for joining me today. It has been a pleasure. I I've I there's so much more that we could talk about. So I hope
I
that
know.
we can talk again sometime soon.
Yeah, a part two. It's been so nice. This has been like the highlight of my day. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. If you resonated with what you heard, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and share it with a friend who would also benefit because we rise together. Until next time, Mama, keep shining.